I didn't change my life by optimizing it. I changed it by acting from a new identity before I was ready and letting the mistakes teach me. And that turned out to be a lot messier and a lot more effective than any productivity system I've ever built. At the end of 2024, I tried to do what I've always done when something felt off. I tried to optimize. I had a solid productivity setup, I was taking detailed notes, I was tracking goals, but something wasn't working. My notes system was full, but I couldn't find anything. Goal setting had turned into a ritual rather than a driver of change. And underneath all of it was a quiet realization I didn't want to look at yet. I had the tools. What I didn't have was a clear idea of where I wanted to go. In early 2025, 3 things started happening in parallel. First, I reworked how I used my notes. Not just storing information, but actually connecting it. That finally made my history and patterns visible instead of buried. Second, I went looking for better goal setting and ran into an uncomfortable truth. I didn't lack discipline. I lacked vision. I wrote in my journal at the time, in early January, I already had all the tools I needed. What I didn't know is what I wanted to actually do using these tools. And once that cracked open, I started connecting to something deeper. One of my long-standing someday ideas was one day becoming a coach or a mentor. Not now, later. But instead of planning for that future, I did something impulsive. I signed up for my first coaching course, and that introduced a completely different idea. The shift was subtle, but it changed everything. I stopped thinking of the future as something to prepare for and started thinking of it as something to enact. Not perfectly, not comfortably, and definitely not all at once. The question stopped being, how do I improve my current life? And it became, how does the person I'm becoming act today? That reframed productivity, personal knowledge management, and goal setting overnight. They weren't about optimization anymore. They were about alignment. In the second quarter of the year, I made my shift public. I registered a business, I figured out my niche, and I started calling myself a coach. Not because I felt ready, but because waiting was keeping me stuck in the old identity. I forced myself into situations I'd been avoiding for years. Conferences, networking, one-on-one coaching. And here's the part that surprised me the most. My productivity systems had gotten so good that I could execute more work than I was capable of physically sustaining. Optimization wasn't saving me anymore. It was driving me toward overload. By mid-year, everything converged. I shifted from consuming information to producing tools, from studying to standing as a peer. I launched things before they were polished. I made mistakes in public. And instead of retreating, I adjusted. That's when the identity stopped being theoretical. I wasn't planning to be a coach anymore. I was one. By September, I was effectively working 1 full-time and 2 part-time jobs and juggling 3 identities. External stressors were piling up. My systems were enabling me to go long past what was healthy. That was the real test. Not whether I could do more, but whether I would do less. The last quarter of the year saw the true transformation. Instead of collapsing, I leaned into the emotional intelligence work I'd been doing. I accepted that everything can't happen at once. I can't do everything at once. I must focus and prioritize. I stepped back from commitments that no longer fit. I redesigned my systems to support boundaries, not just output. Family, relationships, and self-care became first-class citizens, not an afterthought. And I committed to the next step before anything was ready. A live workshop, a public event in January, and this YouTube channel. A continued bet on my new identity. Here's what 2025 taught me. Productivity isn't just task management. You can build systems that let you track more effort than you're capable of giving. PKM isn't just note-taking. When it's connected, reflective, and reviewed over time, particularly with the aid of AI, it becomes a mirror. But most importantly, success isn't about optimizing who you are. It's about choosing who you're becoming and acting from that identity before it's comfortable. I didn't optimize my life in 2025. I rewrote it. If this resonates, if you feel stuck optimizing a life that no longer fits, that's one of the things I explore on this channel. So please feel free to subscribe. And if you have any stories about how you rewrote your life, I'd love to hear about it in the comments.